Turns out socialists don't understand economics, finance, capitalism, or even their useless socialist policies. They run the economy like this. What even is that? This guy says this is the perfect visual metaphor for how socialists drive an economy. Yes, it's accurate. They have no idea what's going on, and they leap out at the smallest concern. Here's another one. It was extra cringe, so I found it necessary to fix it for them. It says, my reply to TikTok dance challenge BS the Democrats put out today. Well, I don't think we can do the music because we'll get banned on our YouTube video. But you can see this absolute nonsense and the total lack of understanding of economics. Why do so many blue cities have so many freaking homeless people? That's the real question. Oh my goodness. And here we have another one of KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov. He escaped the Soviet Union, came to America decades ago, and told us all about the manipulation the Soviets were engaging in order to demoralize us and convince us that socialism was the correct way, which it obviously is not. So let's see what he has to say about woke leftist college professors.
Useful idiots, the leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet socialist or communist or whatever system, when they get disillusioned, they become the worst.
That useful idiots phrase often gets attributed to Lenin, I believe, right? But I think it certainly went along with his views that Lenin believed he could manipulate useless intellectuals, especially in the West. But I don't know that he ever actually used the phrase useful idiots, but this guy definitely did.
Enemies. That's why my KGB instructors specifically made a point, never bother with leftists. Forget about these political prostitutes. Aim higher.
But to eliminate the others, to execute the others, don't they serve some purpose? Wouldn't they be the ones we rely on?
They serve purpose only at the stage of destabilization of a nation. For example, your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders.
Yeah, I'm a college professor, but at least I'm not far left wing.
They are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned,
if you remember what happened in Maoist China, right? The college professors, the pseudo intellectuals pushed for a communist revolution, and then they were the first ones to get pushed into forced labor. Had to clean the floors of the schools with toothbrushes as the students took over, and eventually they started just killing these people.
They see that Marxist-Leninists come to power. Obviously, they get offended. They think that they will come to power,
and they never do. They never actually get the power that they want. Right? The Iranian Revolution in 1979, the communists took over the previous regime in Iran, and then as soon as they got into power, the imams came in and eliminated all the previous communists.
That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It's the same pattern everywhere. The moment they serve their purpose, all the useful idiots are either be executed entirely. You see, the useful idiots, the leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet socialist or communist or whatever.
Yeah, so it just doesn't work. It's not effective in any capacity. That's why the rest of us support greats like Thomas Sowell on What's Wrong with Education Today. He says, too many students are introduced to a certain vision of the world, right? Conflict of Visions. Pick that book up if you haven't read it already. It's one of his best. For example, the capitalists are exploiting the workers. They just memorize that, and they talk about it as if it's a known fact. There's no developing in those students the ability to look at two different views and try to figure out which is correct. right? I mean, they don't have any evidence for the alleged idea that capitalists are exploiting the workers. In a capitalist society, you could just go to a different job if you don't like your current one.
And unfortunately, I think too many certainly, college students and students in high school for that matter, are introduced to a certain vision of the world where, for example, the capitalists are exploiting the workers and so on. And they just memorize that, and they talk about it as if it's a known fact. And there's no developing in those students the ability to look at two different views and try to figure out which of them is correct.
There just isn't any analysis. It's all about emotions. Equity is not a rational worldview, right? Equality of outcomes is not a rational worldview. In a free society, we're able to pursue our own positive self-interest, and when we become the best version of ourselves, it tends to benefit the people around us. So I don't really see the problem with capitalism, where you can follow your own positive self-interest. The socialists condemn it, say it represents greed, but greed is unfortunately a human trait, as is, but empathy is as well. Milton Friedman said that, he asked really, like, have you ever heard of a society that didn't function on greed, right? Every society that has human beings has greed. Here's another one with Gavin Newsom. No, this shot is real. Tell me this is a joke. It's a joke, right? Says Jillian Michaels. Gavin Newsom's California is now blocking parents from receiving the medical records of their children after they turn 12 unless they receive consent from their children. I still consider this a socialist belief, right? Since socialists and communists have historically been against the two-parent household. The Communist Manifesto explicitly condemned the two-parent household as a product of capitalist oppression. So, the rise of socialism amongst Democrats also means the rise in government taking over, taking children from parents.
Can you wait? Hold on.
Say that again.
Wait, I'm like, can you? Okay, hold on. Let me understand this. So, while he's 11, I'll have access to his medical records. But once he turns 12, the government locks me out.
Yes, because there's the I'm sure you've heard of HIPAA.
Yeah,
so
of course.
He now has privacy rights under HIPAA once he's 12.
So as a parent, I can't see my 12-year-old's medical records?
No.
What? I thought it was...
That's just unbelievable. A 12-year-old is not mature. Come on. You could say it, but there's certain ones that are mature for a 12-year-old, but, parents should still be able to have access to their children's medical information at that age. Oh my goodness.
14. I've heard...
Okay, so it's crazy, and I'm not saying that, I'm the bearer of bad news. Please don't listen.
No, I understand. You're just doing your job. It's okay.
I don't even agree with it. So, but, I literally had to have my daughter come in the doctor's office with me and say, you can give my mother access to, elevated access. And you can request elevated access, but your child has to agree to it.
Got it. Okay, he's not even going to understand what that is.
I know. It's so crazy. You're like, you know what?
He's an 11-year-old boy. He's like...
Kid wants to play video games.
Appointment for me, and I'm like, no, sorry.
That is crazy work.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Crazy. So, I'm so sorry, but,
the state wants to control your children. That's an absolute fact. Today's show, a full hour with Peter Schiff, all things economy, and both parties don't believe in free markets and exist only to enrich their cronies so that they can pass on inflation to the public. That is very true. I think arguably the only socialist thing in the U.S. is really the existence of the Federal Reserve, which is in control of the production of money, and it creates inflation, which is the hidden tax that many economists have criticized for centuries, right? For centuries. And it's unfortunate that people don't want to get rid of it. But let's see what Peter Schiff has to say.
The whole Republican message is vote for us because we're going to cut your taxes. But what they don't want to do is, compromise that by also cutting spending. And so the whole thing is a lie.
There's very few politicians that are actually pro cutting spending. It's really unfortunate that we can't manage to figure that out. Peter Schiff's a guy that supports gold and believes in that more people should be buying gold and silver.
Because the real rate of taxation is what government spends. Every dime of spending equals taxation by government. But the Republicans don't want to risk cutting anything, because then they'll get attacked by the Democrats for cutting stuff. And they may lose some votes because a lot of Republicans also get checks from the government, particularly Social Security checks and Medicare checks. So in order to maintain their difference, their supposed difference with the Democrats, Republicans were the party of low taxes. They have to cut taxes. But the consequence is higher inflation, and they don't want to accept responsibility for that, nor do they want anybody in the Republican Party critical of their phony tax cut.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that we don't really have a party that's actually willing to dramatically cut taxes, and then, the Republicans' inability to solve financial issues and in that regard, and actually lower taxes and lower inflation lead to the rise of the rise of prices, and then the rise of Mamdanis, unfortunately. It says here, Asmongold asks why any wealthy person would choose to stay in a state that's engineered to hate them. My goodness. Let's see what this says.
This is the problem, is that why would anybody want to live in a state that is engineered, like it's basically run by a party of people that hate you. And on top of that, they want to take more of your money so they can fund their projects that don't work. Why would you want to live there? Why would you want to do, why would a person who has the
And that's why all the rich people are leaving. They're losing tons of people. I think Seattle is actually worse than New York right now. They have a huge problem with massive amounts of open offices. So they can't pay all the bills that they want to pay. I mean, socialists don't understand second order problems. They don't understand how the decisions they make will lead to negative outcomes. So they lose tons of people, and because they think of everyone as robots. It's crazy that they think of rich people as robots who will just stay there. They're the rich people are the most able to move some other place. So relying on them exclusively to pay your bills is a bit naive. It's more than a bit naive. It's extremely stupid.
Option and the choice to live wherever they want. Why would they want to live there? They can literally just go to another state where you don't have to deal with this. It's never worked. Same thing happened in California. Well, it's still happening.
These are not just numbers that one organization has come up with. These are numbers from the IRS and from federal data trackers. So this is real. New York lost roughly $11 billion in tax revenue in one single year. Florida, that's the premier destination.
11 fucking bill. Oh my God. Wow. It's really bad. And holy
Looks
shit.
like Texas might be number 2. They're fleeing because of wealth. They made $21 billion in net interstate wealth.
Let's remember, the top 20% of income earners pay most of what the federal government receives. The rest of us are paying taxes as kind of a just to say that we could, I guess. It's not really accomplishing that much. The top 20% of income earners pay almost 80% of what the federal government actually brings in.
Do you think there's a legitimate way to get billionaire buy-in to Mandami's socialist welfare state concepts? So I think that there is a way. So if you want rich people to pay more taxes, you have to do it nationwide. You can't do it statewide because it's too easy to just go to another state.
Well, I like Aswan, but that's just a little ridiculous. Like those rich individuals will just move to other countries, right? I mean, this happens all the time. Move to Singapore, move to Switzerland, move to Luxembourg, move to Monaco, move to whatever the heck the next place is. That's a financial hub, and then they can not pay nearly as many taxes as they did previously. So I think these sort of comments are not accurate.
And ignore this. So if you actually want to impose a higher cost of wealth, or a higher tax, you have to do it for the entire country, and you can't just do it for one state.
It'll make it a little easier, but again, a lot of people are just going to move away. Okay, and then this guy, democratic socialists. Oh my goodness. This is not a good ideology. Again, as Richard Wolff, who's a famous YouTube socialist, said when a child asked him, how would I get a PlayStation 5 in your democratic socialist system? He said you'd have to have the community vote on it, which is hilarious. I mean, that's got to be really bad for young people to look at that and say, okay, listen, like if I want to buy a PlayStation 5, not only do I have to convince my parents to support it, now I have to convince everybody else parents as well to to pay for my PlayStation 5. Bro, you young people, you're not getting a PlayStation 5 in a socialist country. Come on. That's not happening. There's going to be massive shortages. There's no prices. Prices are information. You're not going to get like this is why socialist countries with that lack of information suffer from massive shortages, or in some cases sometimes they massively overproduce things, but then you'll end up with tons of millions of PS5s and no food. That's how things function in socialist societies. Austin Wade Peterson has some good content if you check him out on X. It says, if you haven't signed my petition to enforce Communist Control Act, why not? The Democratic Socialists of America has unveiled a new campaign calling for the abolition of the U.S. Senate, with co-chair Gustavo Gordillo describing it as an undemocratic institution, right? They have a very weird view of democracy. A democratic socialist does not value capitalism where you get to vote on products and services. They want to be able to vote on you. That's the difference, right? In a capitalist society, you can go to the store with your $2 and you can buy yourself a Snickers bar. And then you can say, hey, that's a win-win negotiation. That's the essence of capitalism. It's very simple. Win-win negotiation. You go to the store, you give them $2, they give you back food, the end. You don't need to read a 1,000-page book to understand capitalism. You can to better understand it, but you don't have to be involved with it. Whereas to understand communism, you can read all 3 volumes of Das Kapital. I only read the first one, but you still don't really learn how the system's supposed to function, because they don't understand how it's supposed to function. They just believe in magic. Anyways, let's watch this video.
So you don't want to abolish the Senate, the United States Senate, because that's what Article 1 is.
The United States Senate is an undemocratic institution. It gives more representation to people in smaller states than to the 30 million people in California.
So you've got the House of Representatives, which is population driven.
So right off the bat, you can understand this guy doesn't get the problem with the tyranny of the majority, right? You don't want to live in a society where 51% of people can vote away the rights of the other 49%. That's what happens in dictatorships. And that's what happens in democratic socialist countries, right? It's not a new thing for dictators to promote democratic socialism as the solution. Lenin did that, and then he started the gulags and killed 4 million people. So the ends of his goals are not good.
Mm-hmm. And then
the end of his ideas are not good.
You've got the Senate. So every state, if you're a small state, you still get 2 senators, even though you only get maybe 1 congressman, in order to make all of the states have fair representation. So you say, I'm just confused.
When you ask normal Americans if Congress and the Senate and our political system is working for them, most people are very unhappy with the political system, and they say it's not working for them. When we think about the 250th anniversary of the United States, and we think about our proudest moments in U.S. history, I think of times like when ordinary people rose up and they changed the Constitution to abolish slavery, to give women the right to vote.
Everyone's proud of that.
And
that's a nationwide.
Oh, it's amazing to me that socialists will act like they had something to do with that. Socialists weren't around, improving the rights of anyone. They weren't there fighting for the rights of anyone to end slavery, right? They weren't involved, but they sit there, the socialists and the progressives do, claiming that they had something to do with improving these rights when they had nothing to do with it whatsoever, right? Classical liberalism and conservatism had a lot more to do with improving the rights of greater swaths of people. And socialists had nothing to do with it. Every time socialists get into power, they bring back slavery. It's just enslavement to the state.
Pride in the country.
But back in those moments, those were considered radical movements because those people dared to say we need transformative change in the United States.
Right.
And I
well,
think
we
that
struggle to become a more perfect union. But I just want to ask you again, do you want to abolish the United States Senate? Because you said you approve of Article 1, but then you said you didn't think the Senate works.
We think that the Senate should be reformed, that we should have a more democratic government system.
He doesn't mean democratic, he means utopia. This is a guy who grew up without a father.
But that's a long-term change that we're seeking. And in the short term, we're focused on issues like affordability, like freezing the rent, which we've just done in New York, like creating a universal childcare system, which we're also taking steps toward doing, like fixing our energy grid.
Like fixing our energy grid. The leftists like him were the ones who wanted to end nuclear power. You know, we would have no energy problems at all if we were allowed to engage in nuclear power. And then in the next few decades, at some point, we might just have fusion power. How amazing would that be? But this guy obviously is completely out to lunch. He has no idea what's going on. You know, if the choice is between the Constitution or communism, I'm picking the Constitution. I don't know about you. If you're listening to me to speak, you probably agree. But anyway, here's another one from the Vigilant Fox. I like this guy's channel. It says these people have to have multiple jobs in order to sustain a lifestyle. This is such a stereotypical progressive and socialist argument. They think that prior to capitalism, people lived in a utopia. No. Prior to capitalism, people lived in dirt, right? Like it was normal even for all Americans to live on dirt floors until the late 19th century. And then you had cork flooring come up and other types of flooring that became more common, right? So, but the socialist perspective is that prior to capitalism, everyone lived in a perfect utopia, right? Rousseau's noble savage theory, which is a racist worldview. But instead of reading that, let's watch this video and see what kind of nonsense this woman espouses.
These people have to have multiple jobs in order to sustain a lifestyle.
Some people, not the median American. Not the median American.
Some people, yes. American relying on minimum wage.
What percent of
So let's remember when it comes to the minimum wage, right? That the employee turnover rates, in many retail organizations is more than 100%. And that means that they're replacing their entire staff over a year's time. And that's typical in socialist countries. Or, sorry, not socialist countries. I didn't mean to say that. That's typical in capitalist countries. And that means that individuals are going to take on some other job. They're not staying there for long. What's the problem? What's the problem with that exactly? People have an entry-level job, they get a couple of skills, and then they go on to something else. What's the problem with that?
The American population is relying on federal minimum wage?
I don't know.
Because you don't know anything.
I haven't met anyone who's making the federal minimum wage.
It's just knowing facts about a country.
But I've met people across
No, it doesn't matter who you've met, lady. That's not what changes statistics. You need to disconnect from that. Your anecdotal collection of bullshit is not the real world. It isn't.
I'm trying to meet people
What
where they're at.
percent do you think makes the federal minimum wage in the United States? What percent do you think? What percent? No, answer the question. Or I am ending this podcast. Answer the question.
I don't know.
This guy.
Answer what you think.
30%?
It's less than 1%.
There you go. Almost nobody makes the federal minimum wage. And even if they do, they're on it for an extremely short period of time. They learn some skills and they move on, Like that's how it goes. So we should be starting these entry-level jobs earlier. Well, I think one of the biggest problems is we've decided to not put as many teenagers to work and decided to have people spend all kinds of time in school until they're in their mid-20s and then finally go out to work. And then the jobs they apply to say, oh, you need 5 years experience and a college degree. They have the college degree, but not the 5 years experience. That's a major problem time and time again. So people should be starting their working life earlier. I really think so, because the public schools are just not teaching them the things that they need to know.
You know nothing.
Well, waitresses make less than that.
No, they don't. Waitresses and bartenders often get paid quite well. Like the tips are great. I mean, and interestingly, women tend to receive a higher amount of tips than males on average. So, you can make some good money in some of these jobs.
It's still less. Oh my goodness. Yes, but after tip income. Mm-hmm. It's less than 1%. You know nothing. You're outraged. You're performative. You're a virtue signaling moron. You have prepared talking points and you know nothing about the real world.
That's I love this guy. Oh my goodness. That's just an explanation of the modern leftist world, I think, It's a major problem. And, as many people have said, it seems to be the case that you can tell people's opinions by their hair color these days, which is unfortunate, why not? I'm bald, but why not dye your hair? Whatever her turquoise is her hair color or purple or something. I don't really see a problem with that necessarily. It's just that at this point, it's basically virtue signaling utopian leftist politics that don't apply to the real world. Here's another socialist who seems to be losing her shit. It says these democratic socialists are insufferable and entitled. Abolish rent? Many of them want to receive value without giving any.
We make this rent payment effectively at the barrel of a gun
because
we know that if we don't make this payment, our landlords can call on agents of state violence and who can use physical force to throw us outdoors.
You're absolutely right, as it should be. You entered into a contract citing they would give you a place to stay. In exchange for that, you would pay them money. Yes, it's called a mutual agreement. They're providing a place for you to live. That's providing value. You, on the other hand, in exchange for them providing that place for you to live, you're giving them cash. You both agreed on that and signed a contract. That contract is enforceable by the law. So if you up and decide you are just going to break the contract and you're going to stay in the apartment or the house and no longer pay, yeah, they should forcibly remove you. That is how you remedy the contract or the breach of contract. That's fair. And these are these democratic socialists complaining.
See, socialists just don't believe in win-win negotiation, right? Like that you trade something of yours for something of somebody else's, and then everyone's happy, right? Like you have to come to agreement for the transaction to happen. That's capitalism. You're not being forced into anything. Socialists think they know what's better for you, and they want to run your economic decisions.
About having to pay rent. I should just have a place to stay because I exist. Housing is a right. No, it's not. But she wasn't done.
Why isn't housing a right? Right? That's the question, isn't it? There's a big difference between negative rights and positive rights. The Bill of Rights is a series of negative rights. It says the government cannot interfere with these rights that I have as a person. I have these God-given rights that should not be interfered with, like free speech and the ability to defend myself. So these are rights we have as Americans, right? These are rights that all human beings should have, really. Positive rights are not really rights at all. It's pro-enslavement. You're saying, hey, well, guess what? You have to do this task for me, or we put you in prison. So certainly it'd be nice if everyone could get the health care they needed exactly when they needed it, but all these universal health care programs seem completely unable to do that. They have massive shortages. I think with the research I've done that American healthcare is actually far better than European healthcare. In America, you can get a hip replacement in a month typically. In Europe and also in Canada, you might have a year, 2 years wait. And, so socialists be asking themselves why this is. Universal is also welfare for the rich, and they don't want to admit this.
On rent strike, right? Like getting to experience having your housing without having to pay for it is one of those liberatory vision of home.
She seems excited about not having to pay rent and being able to live somewhere. Doesn't take into account that someone had to buy the land, build the building, maintain the building, pay insurance on the building. None of that matters. We want to be able to live somewhere for free, and that's our right. Goofy. That is not how the real world works. They literally want to receive value while providing none. I've said this before. These democratic socialists are like parasites. They want to receive value without giving value. They need a fat, juicy capitalist host that they can be a parasitic leech upon and suck resources from and redistribute to the people who don't want to be productive. Heaven forbid you have to actually provide value in order to have a place to stay. Heaven forbid you have to exchange something and you're just not entitled and just don't get stuff for free. Oh, the horror. The more I pay attention, the more I start to feel confident in calling these people a bunch of idiotic, parasitic losers. They're not good for the country and they're not good for the world. Anyway, that's all I've got for now.
All right, yeah, be sure to check this stuff out. And so he has some good points there. And then here we have a comment about Jordan Peterson. I don't know if guys in the UK understand how sad it is for us in Canada and in the United States to watch what you're doing to yourself. And let's see what he has to say here.
I don't know if you guys in the UK understand how sad it is for us in Canada and in the United States to watch what you're doing to yourself. I mean, the UK is a great country. When I go there, I go to Oxford, I go to Cambridge, to these remarkable places in London, see your unbelievable deep history, understand how much the world owes the UK in terms of, say, the establishment of common law and decent government everywhere, including places like India. We owe the UK such an immense debt. And to watch you guys like spiral yourselves into the ground for this idiot, weak political correctness that's gone so far that you can allow your working class women to be raped en masse sadistically and say nothing about it and gaslight people who are telling the truth. It's so sickening. It's so demoralizing. It's almost unspeakable.
But that is the fake empathy of the parasite socialist class, as the previous guy said. You know, they just don't really care. They socialists tend to have out-group preferences. Most people have in-group preferences. They like, being around people that are somewhat similar to them, but still understand that other people should have rights and strangers also deserve rights. So socialists tend to hate themselves and hate their community and hate their society. And, they don't invade other countries as much as they invade their own country and destroy their own country. This is the case for the Soviet Union and Maoist China, etc.
All pray, hope and pray here in Canada and the US that you get your act together and grow some spine again and put your damn country back together and stand up to these bloody psychopathic bullies and the woke green mob, because it would be a dreadful shame to lose you.
And that arguably, the green mob is arguably a socialist religion. I think that I can't remember the author that pointed that out more than 20 years ago. Might have been Crichton. I can't remember. Wrote a diatribe or a polemic criticizing the environmental movement for being extremely religious in nature and controlling. And then we have, let's see here. Oh, this thing's in my way. Socialism is a ticket to nowhere. It's what Trump has been doing. I don't really agree with that, but whatever. I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive. I want universal health care. I want a strong social safety net. The only way to do that is to have the prosperity the capitalist economy creates. The guy can't say anything positive about Trump, and that's his own problem. But he is correct in saying that the only way you can have a welfare state is with a highly successful capitalist society.
Welcome back, Governor. Explain to me and our audience, what is the danger you see in these DSA candidates that you think voters who support them might be missing?
Well, I'd want to evaluate each candidate separately, but I can certainly talk about how socialism is a ticket to nowhere. Frankly, socialism is a lot of what President Trump has been doing. I mean, quite literally, buying 15% of Intel, having Department of Defense buy 10% of a company called MP Materials, government ownership of the economy. Here's what's wrong with that, Laura. Two things. Number one, it sets the government up as a player and referee. How can the government regulate the private sector to ensure competition, to prevent monopolies, if they're actually an owner of companies in the private sector and have a vested interest? Number two, I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive. I want universal health care. I want a strong social safety net. The only way to do that is to have the prosperity that a capitalist economy creates. No socialist country has ever had a successful economy. Every country in Europe is a market economy, capitalist economy. You have to be, actually, to join the EU. It's in their bylaws. You have to have a market economy. They all have universal health care. That's the model we need. Capitalism and prosperity.
Well, they have universal health care, and it's terrible. They just lie about child mortality rates. Look that up. Gemini was criticizing me for calling them liars. But at the end of the day, it's true. Like, they're lying about child mortality rates in order to make the universal health care look better. But it's actually quite bad. You have horrible waiting lists for everything from hip replacements to cancer treatments, and that's just horrible for the European people.
Not socialism and poverty.
And yet, Governor...
But I like the fact that he's criticizing socialism. I have to admit that. At least he understands that reality.
There are many who would look at democratic socialism and say it's not that they are opposed to money or an economy, it's the exploitation to the benefit of those who are in power and remain elite. I mean, the idea of socialism is gaining popularity among Democrats. In one poll, 55% of
Oh, my
Democrats
God.
said it would be good for the U.S. to move towards socialism. I see the points that you're raising, and I've heard others echo it in their concern. So if you feel their positions are so out of step or in the wrong direction, why do you think some of these candidates are resonating with voters from the Democratic Party?
Look, socialism is a tool to further exploit people. By putting the
Yep.
government and the power of the economy together, you're preventing that counterbalance that government can provide against a runaway private sector.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I suppose institutions are used to some extent in order to facilitate society. All right, here's another one from John Stossel talking about how those Northern European countries are really not socialist at all. They aren't. The only country that's a higher GDP per capita in Northern Europe than the United States, are the ones that have sovereign wealth funds because of their oil reserves, and even then they pay ridiculously higher taxes. And their countries largely became successful when they were capitalist, and then they adopted far too much spending.
Today, many Americans don't like capitalism. Socialism would be better, they say. Not repressive Russian or Venezuelan socialism, but democratic socialism, like what's practiced in Scandinavia.
I think we should look to countries like Denmark, like Sweden.
Say, wow, you want to be like Sweden? Kinda. Sounds pretty good.
People interviewed in this just-released PBS documentary say America should be more like Sweden.
It seems like it's like a place that, like, no problems or something.
It is a socialist economy.
Volvos and socialized medicine.
Volvo is now a Chinese company.
Welcome to Stockholm, Sweden. My name is Johan Norberg, and this is where I was born and raised.
Johan Norberg made this documentary because he wanted to set the record.
This is actually a great video, the Sweden Lessons for America. There's an hour-long version. I used to use it in class quite often and have students watch it to talk about the differences between Sweden and the United States.
Straight.
Sweden is not socialist because the government doesn't own the means of production. To see that, you have to go to Venezuela or to Cuba or North Korea. But we did have a period in the 1970s and 1980s when we had something that resembled socialism, a big government that taxed and spent heavily. And that's the period in Swedish history when our economy was going south.
So much so that even socialists complained about the high taxes.
Astrid Lindgren, who wrote the very popular children's books, Pippi Longstocking, for instance, she was a social democrat, but she had made a lot of money from her books. She found that she paid 102% in taxes.
She wrote this angry essay about
How unbelievable is that? Oh my goodness! I bet she had some different views about politics and economics beforehand. Before she had to pay that 102% rate, which is incredible.
A witch who was quite mean and vicious, but not at all as vicious as the Swedish tax authorities.
And yet, even though taxes were high, they did not bring in enough money to fund Sweden's welfare state.
There were waiting lines to get health care. People couldn't get the pension that they...
And that's still common to this day. I mean, Americans talk about how their health care is worse than Europe. Europeans talk about their health care is so much better than American health care. I mean, I spent 4 hours in an emergency room in Europe, in Switzerland specifically, after dislocating my thumb because there weren't any doctors at 7 p.m. in the afternoon or in the evening. I mean, nobody would come in. Like nobody was there to be able to solve this problem of my dislocated thumb. I should have just done it myself. They had to call in a real man to solve my thumb problem because the administrators there were unable to do anything. And European healthcare I just think it's not great. The waiting lines are way worse, and Switzerland is not one of the worst healthcare programs in Europe. It's actually one of the better ones in comparison to other European countries. The wait lines, for many conventional issues in Europe are like a year, 2 years.
Thought that they depended on for the future. At that point, the Swedish population just said, enough, we can't do this.
Sweden then reduced government's role. They cut public spending, privatized the national rail network, abolished certain government monopolies.
They also embraced school choice, which I wish America would do as well. Embrace a lot more privatization. That would be fantastic. So hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. Here's another great Thomas Sowell video. I mean, every Thomas Sowell video is a great video, but let's see what he has to say about socialism.
So socialism is a great idea. that does not mean it's a great reality. One of the things that disturbs me tremendously is about this enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders and socialism at a time when people are literally starving.
Let's remember, Bernie was a huge fan of the Soviet Union for years, and now he pretends like he wasn't.
In Venezuela, an oil-rich country, you know, and
that's a common theme, isn't it? I mean, Norway, is an oil-rich country. Venezuela is an oil-rich country. So they have, and then some of these other countries that the socialists praise really are financial hubs that where a bunch of rich people go there to hide themselves from taxes in other countries. Not all those countries are socialist, of course, but the socialists label these countries as socialist all the time.
They're breaking into grocery stores.
Venezuela is obviously socialist, and it's caused them tons of problems, but not Norway or Switzerland.
Stores to try to get food, and they're fleeing to neighboring countries, most of which are not all that prosperous themselves, but at least you don't starve to death in them. And none of that makes a bit of difference. Mm-hmm. I don't think most of these people who are out there cheering for Bernie Sanders have given a thought to Venezuela.
To the evidence.
That's right.
To the evidence.
Yeah.
Yep, they have no idea what they're talking about. That's the problem, isn't it? That's the real problem. Okay. And then it says here, another one about J.D. Vance says on Joe Rogan that unless young people are able to afford life again and be able to afford a home, they will choose socialism and will become a socialist country. And that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, government intervention is what's led to much higher food prices over the past century, much higher housing prices, etc. So, it's a difficult thing to deal with. But, more government solutions are going to increase problems even more and not decrease them. Too many government solutions is the issue so far.
When I okay, let me play devil's advocate with the DSA, because I think that their ideas are crazy, and I think that you're right. They will lead to a very totalitarian.
Actually, let me correct myself. Thomas Sowell said there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs.
I'm not defending a single thing that they say, particularly their hatred of ice cream. What I am saying is, and maybe this is just sort of the way my mind works, I tend to be a little bit more empathetic. Why are young people attracted to socialism in 21st century America? One of the best interviews that Charlie Kirk ever gave, it was right before he died. It was an episode that he did with Tucker Carlson where he talked about the fact that if you don't give young people a stake, if you don't give them ownership, if you don't give them a sense of the American dream and of possibility in the future, they're going to become socialists. Like if you have a zero-sum environment for a 25-year-old in this country, they're going to start to say the only way for me to get anything is to take away from somebody else. So we have to get away from like the zero-sum thinking. I think that's like the root cause of this. But I also think that, look, we've ran an experiment in the United States of America. And, I think that we have undone that experiment, taken it in a different direction in the Trump administration, where ship all the factories overseas and let low-wage foreigners make our stuff. That was a bad deal for American workers. Again, it takes a long time to reverse that trend, but I think it's one of the best parts of Trump administration policy is you do see that trend starting to reverse. This idea that nobody should own anything, we should all become renters, whereas what we're trying to do is lower interest rates. You actually have seen housing costs stabilize in the country over the last year and a half. And
if we were to copy European nations, that would only get worse, right? I believe it's like over 60% of people in Germany are renters. So they have a horrible home ownership problem.
Frankly, because of immigration. We had way too many people going after way too many homes. You close the border.
That's flipped now, though. It looks like housing prices are going to drop dramatically. Obviously the illegals coming into the country dramatically increased prices, especially when the state is paying for these people to live. It's severely limited supply for everyday Americans.
This is one of the reasons why rents and housing costs have stabilized a little bit. So I think that unless you go down that pathway of allowing young Americans to own something, socialism is the inevitable outcome. Do I think that's good? No. But I really do worry, and I see this, frankly, more in my own party than I do on the other side. There is this revulsion to socialism that's totally justified without enough thinking about how did we get here in the first place.
Right.
And if we don't fix that, And I would say if we don't get back to a more Christian sort of understanding of economics, socialism is the alternative. Like that is where this goes.
Well,
if people don't
think
own
the game
anything,
is rigged.
exactly.
Yeah.
And in some ways, Joe, the game is rigged.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
if you look at, I mean, again, I think so much of housing because, this happened. I think it was during the presidential campaign. Maybe it was right before. But I was talking to some family members over Thanksgiving, and just a sort of a younger friend of my wife's. They were like 5 or 6 years behind us. They were just about to get married, and this young woman, successful engineer, makes a higher salary than most Americans. She just sort of like tossed out there that when her parents' generation was coming up, it was like possible to own a house and to raise a family and not be worried that much about things. And
there's some truth to that idea, but at the same time, when my parents were coming up in the 80s, the interest rates are out of control, and it makes it really difficult to pay for a house when interest rates are extremely high. I mean, I believe in some years they were higher than they are now, and the interest rates are quite high right now. So they may keep them high in order to stave off inflation. But I think that the housing bubble is currently slowly popping, and that housing prices are going to drop over the next few years. But I'm not a financial advisor, so be sure to do your own research and decide for yourself. These are just personal opinions for your entertainment.
My thought was, okay, you're an engineer. You make way more money than 75% of people your age, maybe 90% of people your age. And you think that it is like this ridiculous, unachievable objective to have literally what your parents had, which is a decent job, a nice house, and is safe.
Let's remember as well, people have a massive amounts of nostalgia for the 1950s, but the average house size was dramatically smaller in the 1950s. You have a 700 or 800 square foot house with 6 people in it. I mean, no wonder parents back then were always throwing the kids out of the house and saying, "Oh my goodness, get out of here. Like, we need some space," because each person in the house would have 100 square feet to their name or something.
Place. Like at that literally that same dinner, like another friend of my wife's was talking about this, and he, South Indian family, grew up, his parents immigrated. He was born and raised in San Diego. And he was like, when I was growing up in Oceanside, this is like a suburb of San Diego where a lot of Marines live in Oceanside. It's close to Camp Pendleton. So when I was growing up, all of my, like the kids that I played with, that I rode bikes with, that I was, playing street hockey with and football with, all of those kids were the sons of enlisted Marines in Oceanside, California. And then we went and looked at like Oceanside, California rents. Again, this is a couple years ago, rents and housing prices. Like every house was north of $1 million on the street this guy grew up in. And enlisted Marine, frankly, most Marine officers could not afford to buy $1 million house. So like, does the socialism thing scare me? Yes. Is it the wrong solution? Yes. But one thing I try to persuade my fellow Republicans of is socialism is the alternative if we don't have a pathway to give people a sense that the system is not rigged and that the American dream is attainable.
Yeah, Americans' incomes have been increasing dramatically over the past century. Are there things that could be better? Yeah, that's always the case. There's always situations where things could be better. But I think overall, America is still the best place on earth to live.
Like our job. That's what we have to do.
J.D. Vance is absolutely right. Before Charlie Kirk died, he did many, many speeches where he said that young people will choose socialism and socialism candidates if they are not able to afford life, if they are not able to afford a home. And that's exactly what's happening. I'll let you watch this.
What do they care about? So there's a race against the clock that's happening right now. And I think President Trump is uniquely suited to fix it. He has to fix it, which is, can we reorder the economic reality of under 30s before dark political radicalization sets in?
The economic reality.
Correct.
There's a topic that's never broached.
Well, here we go.
No, but it's just interesting it's interesting that's your first answer. The economics. I have always noticed, and I am insulated from a lot of that stuff, I'll admit, I don't really notice.
I would be otherwise if I didn't spend as much time, because we're We do very well. We're in the top income bracket. So,
well, I just noticed no one talks about it. So I think that's weird. People used to talk about economics. They don't anymore. So you think that's economics is the number one issue for young people?
Oh,
if we don't address it, we go to dark places. What does that mean?
So a couple things. Number one, the rise of Mamdani should be it's a coming attraction of what is coming next.
Who's Mamdani?
Zohran Mamdani.
He doesn't know? Oh my goodness. I should make some jokes about that since Carlson makes jokes about other people not knowing certain things sometimes. But anyways, this video is a little bit old, so that's why that he doesn't know the reference exactly is the real reason. But yeah, that's very true. I mean, and unfortunately, a lot of these people, they lived in a utopian college situation and don't know about what Thomas Sowell would describe as the number one rule of economics, which is scarcity. If you don't understand scarcity, you really can't think about real problem solving. So,
the Muslim communist that is running for mayor in New York City,
who actually won, surprisingly. The benefit of this though is that New York is going to decline, probably like Detroit declined, and hopefully that's going to teach a new generation a lesson. Unfortunately, it's just so sad we have to learn this every generation and people have to suffer as a result that socialism is a failure. But at least we live in a free country in the United States where, we probably won't degenerate into the level that socialist countries did throughout the world in the 20th century.
Who obviously there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down there. He just looks kind of be like central casting and, his ideas are terrible. He wants the city to run the grocery stores, all that. But I think everyone's not everyone, but most people are missing the point of really what this is. This is yet another distress signal by young people to say, hey, if you're not going to fix our life economically, we're going to get very radical politically. But let's take a step back. It's just another iteration of this, only from the left, which is
a credit-centric renter economy.
Yes, which is the way that we need to focus, that we need to kind of frame this. So let me kind of paint this picture. It is harder than ever to own a home. We know this, but how much harder? Back when my parents had to go own a home, the price of a home...
How old are your parents?
They're early 70s, so late 60s, early 70s. So baby boomers.
Yeah.
And great parents, by the way, phenomenal upbringing, great values. So back when they wanted to go buy a home, in their beginning income years, 1970s, 1980s, home prices were on average about 3 times the average income in America. They are now 7 times the average income in America.
Well, that's government intervention, right? 40% of the cost of a home is regulations. That's a major problem.
Rents have gone up inflation adjusted from about $900 a month to now about $1,500 a month.
Inflation adjusted.
Inflation adjusted. The age of a first-time home buyer in 2008 was 30 years old. It is now 38 years old. First-time home buyer. So when we have a picture of a first-time home buyer,
and that's scary.
You think of, kind of a toddler in one arm, a dog, you're trying to figure it out. 38 years old. So what is causing this? Well, number one, I don't want to get like too Ron Paul libertarian, but the Federal Reserve pumping in cheap money post-2008 has just been a catastrophe. We have spent too much money, borrowed too much money. We have deteriorated our currency. And the purchasing power every generation is getting weaker. So your dollar is actually going less and less as far as it has year over year. So then what is the consequence of this? So you have a generation that is renting a lot more than it's owning. So when you do not own...
Why is everything so expensive? Well, the Federal Reserve exists, and they print out money, and they give it to the government to pay for a bunch of degenerate, useless welfare shenanigans. And then they loan that money out to large banks, which loads it out to large corporations, which has to then engage in investments with that cheap money that it may not have engaged in regularly. So what do? You go buy assets, right? Large businesses are going to go buy houses. They're going to go, and sometimes they're going to buy stocks, which is a big part of the reason why the system never changes, because if they're buying up more shares of stocks, then stock prices are going up and people's retirements are going up. So that's one thing to consider as well. That's a complicated situation. But if you're just starting out, you're not invested in the stock market, then the way the economy works currently makes things somewhat more challenging.
Something, why would you defend it? So you find then political radicalization start to seep in, because an entire generation is getting routinely cynical year over year as their net worth either stays at zero or goes into negative. Now, my question for every Republican senator and congressman watching this, if you do not know these 4 letters, then you are not doing your job. BNPL. Do you know what that means?
No clue.
Buy now, pay later. Buy now, pay later is how 60%, according to surveys, of Generation Z is paying for things month to month. They're not credit cards. So this is not regulated by credit bureaus. It's not regulated with credit checks. It's basically anything from Amazon to Instacart, groceries, clothing, furniture. You can finance anything. It's BNPL. It's run by 3 main companies, Klarna, Affirm, and Afterpay. And essentially,
that's interesting. A lot of those financial things are on online payment websites, and people use them quite regularly. So that's interesting. I don't think it's the end of the world, though, to say, hey, I'm going to pay for this thing monthly. I mean, if it's your food, I guess that's a major problem. If you're unable to afford groceries. And, food prices are intentionally kept high by the state. That's been the case for a century. I guess the argument originally was that they were going to empathetically keep farmers in jobs. But typically it's best to be concerned with people and not jobs. Jobs change all the time, especially as technology improves. So, it's better to retrain people for other types of jobs than try to get the government to completely take over industries like it did with the farming industry and the banking industry and the housing industry and the education industry and so on and so forth. This has just created all kinds of problems for Americans.
essentially you're 21, 22 years old. You can split a pizza into 4 payments. Sounds great, right? This is the modern tech economy.
Buy a pizza on credit.
Yeah, if you're using it for a pizza, that's kind of crazy. I did it the other day when I bought a camera, an expensive camera that I used for more fun wildlife photography. But yeah, if you're doing it to eat, that's a major problem, right? Like that's an issue because those affirmed payments will add up over time. I would also point out that since the 2007-2008 financial crisis, we have not recovered in employment participation rate. What is that? That is the percentage of adults who are working. It's not the same as the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is very manipulated. Okay, government wants that manipulated number to look good. So if they decide, oh, you haven't been looking for a job in the last month, then you're no longer counted in the unemployment rate. So the unemployment rate often looks artificially low. Okay, the employment participation rate is percentage of adults, working age adults, who are actually currently working. We've never gotten back to where we were prior to 2007. We've never gotten back to prior to that. That's not good. We went up dramatically in employment participation when women were entering the workforce. Okay, so like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and things kind of maintained through the 90s and the 2000s, and then they just got annihilated with the financial crisis, and a lot of people never went to work. So that's kind of sad. We kind of already watched some of the stuff from this KGB guy, but we'll finish it off the video with this. It says former KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov warned that you don't destroy a country with bombs. You demoralize it. We just discussed this. Charlie Kirk just discussed this. What are they doing? I don't think it's a grand conspiracy. We don't have to talk about that. George Carlin said, you don't need a conspiracy when interests align. And people want to be able to grift off of the state. Politicians and bureaucrats want to be able to grift off the state. So it benefits them to have more people on the welfare dole, benefits them to have more people out of the workforce, and so on and so forth. So, they manipulate things in that way. You rewrite the history and teach people to feel ashamed of their country. Once that happens, people stop defending it. And that's what they're doing in the education system. That's what makes me so sad as a teacher. It's just so sad to hear modern students be ashamed of the United States. We've done nothing in our history but improve the rights of greater swaths of people. You can be mad maybe that male suffrage came first, but it doesn't mean that more and more rights for more people came later. And it really has. Every generation has improved in this country. And the technological innovation every generation since about the 1870s onwards has been amazing too and dramatically changed people's lives. That's to huge benefit, I think.
Is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, No one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy.
You know, another example of that too, and why putting the police on every street corner in a city is so effective, is because you stop gangs from recruiting the next generation. Well, I mean, the same sort of idea takes place in the education system. You hand over your children to the state, you know, they're going to indoctrinate an entire generation into believing that socialism is useful. And that's exactly what they've done, to the detriment of the United States. I'm worried about what's going to happen. I'm not a boomer, but I'm worried about what's going to happen when I'm older and boomers are gone. Because my millennial generation and Gen Z seem very pro-socialism, and that's scary.
In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic...
That we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production.
It's unbelievable if these people admit this, and then you go talk to a casual person, and they're like, oh no, they don't really want to control the means of production. They just want slightly increased, this or that. They'll use Bott and Bailey fallacies. They backtrack saying, oh, you just don't care like we care. I care. When the government controls the means of production, it's very bad.
Where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment. And what I want to say is that it is critical that in the way that we organize, in the way that we set up our work and our priorities, that we do not leave any one issue for the other, that we do not meet a moment and only look at what people are ready for.
Wow. That's disturbing. And that's the case with a lot of leftist politics these days, is that you're seeing so many people casually supporting socialism and the government taking over the means of production. But, without pricing, which is information, they end up with overproduction in some industries, but massive underproduction in most others. All right, but we're going to call that the end of the video. I appreciate you for listening for this long. Share with your friends. It's such a huge help, even if you make a comment or what have you. Like, share, or whatever you can do is a huge help, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day.